Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 5. Let's see, what will we do today exactly? One of the most important goals I think, is the completion of the whole belt assembly chain. What's really holding us back at the moment are the painfully low velocity orange belts, which limit our throughput to a massive degree. Just imagine if we could have smelting arrays that are 30 smelters long, instead of just 6 or 7 that we have now. Only, to achieve the goal we need 2 whole new components, namely the graphene, which we need to build a new kind of manufacturing facility for, and we will also need the new blue motors, or supermagnetic rings as they are known by pedants. And when we have time, we will also squeeze in a bit of interplanetary construction, so we can start making titanium plates. Before we get started, if this is not your first video from this channel, you already know what to expect. If you want to be kept up to date, please consider subscribing, and if you like what you see, leaving a like will also help letting me know what to focus on. But enough talking, let's get into it. To get the new assembly building we need for the graphene, we will need bricks and glass. I've been meaning to put them onto the temporary bus anyways, so might as well do it now. We will need them for them all, they are a component needed for a lot of buildings, so having them mass produced will help us in the long term. I really should have done this sooner, but there are so many things to do in this game, it's really hard to focus on a single thing at a time. You know that scene from Malcolm in the Middle? Where Hal is trying to fix the light bulb in the kitchen. Sometimes this game feels like I'm just trying to do a small fix somewhere, and it ends up snowballing into a massive project in about 5 minutes flat. But that's factory games for you, and that's exactly why we love them. Anyways, this was a good excuse to get rid of the old brick furnaces, and replace them with a new array. Bricks were only half of what we need, we also require glass. They are also made out of stone, and thankfully we have plenty of that lying around. Right there. We have an untapped deposit nearby. Setting up these early mining operations can be a bit of a chore. The community was asking for a better alternative for a long time, since these were the only way of mining in the first versions of the game. Thankfully, we now have access to an advanced mining facility, which can cover entire patches of ore, and they can work incredibly fast. But there are still people who want to have access to something even more high-tech. I'll be honest, I'm one of those people. I kind of wish there was some kind of planetary mining tower we could place. Even when using advanced miners, setting up a strip mining operation on a planet can be a bit of a hassle. Don't get me wrong, it's nowhere near as bad as it was when we could only use the tier 1 miners, but it's still not the best. I also wanted to prepare for the mining outpost on our neighboring moon, so I set a bunch of extra buildings to be made. By the way, I've been calling our neighbors planets until now. Technically, they are moons, since all 3 terrestrial bodies orbit around the ice giant. My only excuse is that in normal circumstances, only the starting body would be the moon of the giant, and the other 2 would be proper planets orbiting the star. Either way, to set up that mining outpost, we will need windmills for power, miners to extract those ores, furnaces to smelt them, a whole bunch of belts, and ideally, some rocket turrets to prevent the dark fog from taking advantage of our inability to be everywhere. So, since we have everything in the crafting queue, we might as well go there and take care of it now. I already know that there is a place on this moon where we can find 3 titanium deposits relatively close to each other, so we will place the smelters in the middle of that triangle. This should be pretty much what we need. So, let's get started. Given the abysmal throughput of the orange belts, this many smelters might be a bit optimistic, but might as well go for more than what we can handle, and upgrade things as we are able. Since we have no interplanetary logistics yet, we will have to manually move the smelted titanium over to the home planet ourselves. But, it would be best if we had a stockpile ready for pickup whenever we come around to this place, so we should have a chest at the end, where can pick up the goods. Oh, right. It would also help if we had titanium smelting unlocked. After that tech, I immediately went for magnetic levitation, so we can start making those blue magnets too, which we will need for the blue belts. After that, I just added different research nodes randomly, just to keep knocking things off the list. That was fast. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you have enough research capacity set up. I think a stack of 3 chests will be enough for now. That should be able to hold more titanium than we can carry. And to cap things off, we now just place enough turrets to have full coverage for the entire base, including the mining operation, fill them all up with as much ammo as possible, and we can pretty much call it a job well done. Alright. We have titanium plates being made, and we have enough defense in the area to fend off the low-level attacks from the dark fog. We can head home at this point. And don't forget, we will need to do the exact same thing on the other moon as well, since that's the place where we can get silicon in high enough quantities. I think I mentioned in an earlier episode that we can make silicon out of rocks back home, but it's woefully inefficient. Well, time to take care of the graphene next, I think. The new manufacturing building that we need is the chemical facility. To make those, we will need bricks, glass, steel, and circuit boards. We don't need all that many right now. 4 should be enough. Making graphene is a 2-step process. First, we will need to make some acid, as it is one of the components needed, and they are also made in the chemical labs. To make the acid itself, we will need water, stone, and refined oil. The only new thing is water in that list, but that's also the easiest. We just need to place a couple pumping stations along the edges of the water, and that's it. The assembly arrays are really starting to struggle, but their salvation is close at hand. Their biggest problem is the lack of throughput on the belts, and as soon as we can start upgrading things with the Tier 3 versions, they will come back to life. Ever since we had to redirect the refined oil line toward the storage, we are really struggling to keep the base powered. We will definitely need to do something about that, and soon. Anyways, we now only need stone for the acid, and we have a deposit right here. You would think that strip mining the starter planet is easy, but that really isn't the case. Early on, there just isn't enough consumption to make it fast enough, so they will keep taking up space for a while. There is a single node of stone left untapped. I really like to cover everything. If I decide to cover a deposit, then I want to make sure it will get used completely. Well, now I managed to cover the node that was missing before, but I didn't notice that I also managed to miss another one on the edge. Let's hope I remember to come back to it later. Well, usually I like to transition over to the advanced miners at the earliest opportunity, so we might catch that wayward node then. And that's the acid production sorted. Now comes the graphene. That one is not nearly as complicated as acid, it just needs some graphite as the second component. Well, we have a convenient little coal deposit right here. We can feed this into a couple smelters, make the graphite, and send that over to the graphene facilities. And that about covers the graphene production. Is it perfectly balanced? Not even close. Will it do the job until we unlock interstellar logistics? Absolutely. Now comes the part where we need to take the graphene and belt it over to the blue belt factory. That was a long one. And we are still not done. We will also need those blue magnets. Thankfully, those are relatively simple. The lack of throughput on the belts is really starting to impact the factory. But we are just moments away from the ability to fix all that. To make these blue magnets, we will need the green motors, magnetic rings, and some graphite. All pretty easy stuff. The only thing we will need to make are the graphite, which we can get from the nearby coal deposit, the same way we did for the graphene just moments ago. Same as before. Mine the coal, refine them in a furnace, and then feed the graphite into the assemblers. Almost there. Only need the green motors, and we should be done. And we have officially started making blue belts. And none too soon. The throughput problems on the temporary bus are really starting to impact the entire factory at this point. While we build up a big enough reserve of those belts, I went around and upgraded some of the more problematic lines I could find. The iron was especially troublesome. I think it would help if we doubled up our smelters too. Okay, the iron belt is back to being fully saturated. That's a relief. And we are still not using the blue belts, only the greens. Speaking of, I think it's time to start recycling some of the old stuff, so I dumped all those orange belts we just picked up into their respective chest, so they can be upgraded. The next source of trouble was the magnetic rings. They had enough raw iron, but not enough production, so I tried to give them more smelters. I was just barely able to squeeze in the second row of furnaces, and those power poles will be a bit of a hindrance to my effort for a neat and tidy row, but I will get rid of them in due time. Also, in case you're wondering why I don't just copy-paste the existing ones over to the other side, it's all down to the inserters. Those smelters use the tier 2 ones, and I only have tier 3s in my inventory, and even a single red ghost image will mess up the placement. Now, I do recall that maybe we can hold down one of the modifier keys to place them anyway, but I don't remember which. Well, we just managed to pick up 400 tier 3 belts. The good days are upon us. At this point, I was most concerned about the power, so I hunted for the windmill components, and tried to craft as many of them as I could. Since we no longer need to worry about foundations for these turbines, I decided to start placing them around the polar region, and work my way down toward the equator. It won't be a perfect coverage, the grid tends to become a bit wonky this close to the poles, but it will be good enough. Okay, the magnetic rings are still struggling to have a fully saturated belt. Time to sort them out once and for all. Well, maybe just for the time being. Now that's what I like to see. No gaps at the end of the smelter array. And we reached the point where the gap started to appear on the incoming line carrying the iron ore. Let's take care of that next. With Tier 3 belts, we reached the maximum throughput from that iron deposit, but we can just add more miners onto it. If we feed that onto the main belt, we should be able to reach full saturation. That about as far as I will take that deposit. Thankfully, we have another one nearby, and if we feed that onto the belt, we can definitely reach full saturation. Seeing blue belts full of stuff with zero gaps is always a joyful sight. It's a sign of things working at full capacity. We are just about on the cusp of going into positive power generation. Not gonna lie, as much as I love this new update, one of the best things they added was the floating windmills. Well, we did manage to accomplish a couple things today. The most obvious one is the off-world mining outpost, and good thing that it's chugging along, filling up those storage chests. We will need a lot of titanium for the next level of research. One of the materials for it will be titanium crystals, and as the name suggests, one of the components in making those will be titanium. But we will also need to do some extra chemistry before we get to that. If I remember correctly, organic crystals are also needed, and since we cannot go interstellar yet to mine them, we will need to make them ourselves, which is a bit more complicated than just placing some miners. Incidentally, we won't always be forced to make all the components. Sometimes, we will be able to find them as a natural resource on other planets. Take acid for example. We are making it ourselves at the moment, but when we gain the ability to travel among the stars, we will find places where we can pump up pure acid from the oceans, instead of water. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel, and leaving a like would also let me know that this video was worth making. If you feel that it was good enough, and you can afford it, please consider going to my Ko-fi page, which you can find in the description, and donate an amount that you feel is appropriate. And if you did like what you've seen, there should be links to some of my other videos and playlists on the screen. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.